I wasn't going to do this one, I promise. I've been covering Cadre v Meta a lot lately, and so I was just going to let it simmer a while. Because we're at the end of fact discovery, we're nearing the end of expert discovery, so then just kind of see how things go from here for a while and give you all an update a little later. But then I saw everything that was happening on social media because of this amicus brief that dropped in. I read it when it was posted and it just kind of made me chuckle to myself, and then I didn't worry about it. But then there was this immediate explosion on social media. I mean, anyone and everyone now has something to say about it, and it's just continuing on relentless. And it's one of those that happens quickly enough, and the talking points are so similar enough that it kind of makes you think there must be a back channel there of some kind. Because the whole point of an amicus brief, amicus curiae is Latin for friend of the court. And so these are people who aren't a party to the case, but they're going to be contributing something. They're going to be adding arguments and data that neither of the parties have put forth, and it's usually in support of one side or the other, although sometimes they're just a little more general. But this is from the Copyright Alliance. No surprise they're filing this in favor of the plaintiffs. But really, although amicus briefs are supposed to be helping out the court, sometimes you get an amicus brief that's there for a different reason. It's there for no other reason but to spew propaganda and give cover for the news media and social media influencers who then just push forth with it. And then the moment they're confronted on that, they say, oh, well, that's just what the amicus brief said. I'm just showing you a court brief. This wasn't me. I'm not responsible for this. And just, that's what this is. And it's pretty blatant, especially if you've been following my coverage of it and you know how the case has gone so far. And remember, this is the most mature of the generative AI cases that's out there. It's the one that's furthest along and the one that's giving us a much greater indication of the direction these things are going to go. So we won't go over this into too much detail, but if we start over here on page 5 in the middle, they say that Meta misapplies the fair use doctrine, relying on fair use cases that are no longer controlling and that involve facts, uses, and technologies bearing little resemblance to Meta's. And if you've seen even just my previous video on the subject, you know that's a laugh and a half. But this is the kind of thing that lawyers do. They say, well, this is distinguishable. Distinguishable just means there's something different. And this is pretty typical. You've got lawyers on one side saying that the court cases that support them are just completely on point and absolutely perfect, but that the ones that support the other side are distinguishable. You go through and you nitpick any last little thing. And you see, that makes a difference somehow. And courts are generally immune to that. They can tell when you're really trying to distinguish something. Just like we talked about with Warhol, which they're going to bring up again. Warhol, I'm telling you. But it's distinct from Meta's unauthorized use of massive amounts of copyrighted works to develop a commercial product for commercial purposes. They're really going to lay on this commercial aspect of things because that's what they want. I've pointed this out in several other of the videos on this case and the other AI cases. That's what they're trying to do. They are trying to absolutely destroy fair use, especially when you're in the commercial space. And they want it to be where if you're making money for it, there is no fair use. If your use is at all commercial, fair use doesn't exist. That's what they want. And this is a perfect example of that. And thus they should be afforded very limited weight. Moreover, in arguing that the allegedly transformative nature of its llama model should tip the scales in favor of fair use, Meta improperly asks the court to disregard Warhol, which clarified that even when a court finds a use to be transformative, that finding should have a limited effect on the ultimate fair use determination. That's not what Warhol said. And this is one reason why so many people on both sides were saying Warhol was such a bad case. Because they made it so confusing. Because the idea was that the Warhol version of the Prince photograph still served the same purposes of Prince photograph. The key was it didn't. Warhol never used it that way, but then a newspaper was doing a story on Prince, and they used that as a photo and say, look, here's a photo of Prince. Aha, that's for the same use. That means it's not transformative. That was their idea. That it still looked enough like a photo of Prince that it could be put in the place of a photo of Prince. And in fact, it could be put in place of the exact photo of Prince it was based on. That was the idea, that Warhol's image of Prince wasn't transformative enough to make it fair use. That was the whole idea. But remember, as we've covered before, the idea of a work being transformative predates the idea of fair use. And it's always been the case that merely being transformative is enough to make it not be a copyright violation. And you may remember I covered the case Nichols v. Universal, where the writers of the play Abie's Irish Rose sued the makers of the Coens and Kellys because the story was similar. You had a New York Jew marrying a non-Jew, their families feuded, and hilarity ensues. That's the basic storyline. But as the great learned hand pointed out, those mere ideas are not what makes something copyrightable. It's the expression. And since the Coens and Kellys is clearly a different expression than Abie's Irish Rose, that was all they needed to show. Of course, it's also the case that the Coens and Kellys was based on a book that predates Abie's Irish Rose. That didn't help. But I don't think they even looked at that. It was just the fact that it was a different enough expression that just completely divorced it from any issue of copyright infringement. On the next page, Meta seeks to isolate the training process and ignore the output of generative AI when describing the purpose of generative AI, because the court has already thrown that out. You've already lost that. We've gone over that. All of that got kicked out. Because the output of an AI isn't what you people keep claiming it is. And the fact that you so desperately cling on to this shows us that you don't have any other argument. In describing its purpose as training, Meta claims its copying serves a manifestly different purpose from plaintiff's books. But Meta's motion ignores what comes after the initial training, most notably the generation of output that serves the same purpose of the ingested works. My God, do I have to go over it again? Just watch my previous video. Because I covered what that means in fair use. When they talk about serving the same purpose, they talk about being a direct substitute like the Warhol picture. Whereas, if Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone comes out, and you say, oh, I'm going to write my own Harry Potter-like book. And so you write a book about kids going to wizarding schools and they learn to cast spells and there's a Dark Lord they have to fight. You're using ideas from Harry Potter. You're using the scene of fair, but you're not using any of the expressions of Harry Potter, other than those expressions where a merger would be the case. You then publish it and put it on the shelf. There's nothing infringing in that book. But if people like your book better than Harry Potter and they start buying your book, the publishers of Harry Potter might say, see, that serves the same purpose. It serves the purpose of people reading a book about a wizarding school. That's not what that means. It means it would be a particular substitute for the Harry Potter book, meaning you could get all of the same things out of your book than they did out of Harry Potter. That's what it means for serving the same purpose. That's what it means for being a substitute. Watch my previous video on it. That is ridiculous. See, these arguments are not going to convince the judge. Judge Chombrian knows perfectly well that he kicked out all the points about the outputs because they're BS. And he knows perfectly well what it means in copyright law to serve the same purpose or to be a substitute. He knows this isn't what it means. This isn't for him. This isn't written for his benefit. This is written for the benefit of propaganda. That's the only reason this exists. And then a little lower, they look at Meta's references. They said the court did not simply analyze the immediate purpose of the intermediate copying standing alone. Rather, it considered the ultimate purpose of the use and what effect it might have on the need for the original and on creativity in general. But again, that's just where it's a direct substitute, not where it's something else that people could use instead. Even if it competes with the original, that's not enough. As long as it's transformative, that is cut off. You have step one, you've got the work. Then you take it and you do step 2. Then you take the result of step 2 and you do step 3 and then step 4 and then step 5. And then at the end, you have your work that you're publishing. If any of those steps along the way, if even one of those steps along the way is fully transformative, that's it. It's fair use, and nothing that happens after that matters. When considering the purpose of the use in a Factor 1 fair use analysis, the analysis must not merely consider the intermediate step, but rather must take into account the ultimate purpose of the use. What did I just say? Thus, the purpose of Meta's llama cannot be considered in a vacuum of training. Training, standing alone, is unlikely to constitute a sufficiently transformative use or purpose any more than licensing in Warhol, sampling in Campbell, shrinking in Ariba, archiving in iParadigms, or teaching in Texaco. Except that's the only thing left. Again, everything else got tossed. Meta does not produce infringing outputs. Meta does not store little copies of books in its training model. That's not how it works at all, but they're content to lie to you because they want you to believe that it does. Because that's the only way their attack works, is by lying. The Supreme Court made clear in Warhol that whether a use is transformative is not dispositive of the question of fair use. That is not what Warhol said at all. They said that the picture itself was not sufficiently transformative, and thus it could function as a substitute in the economy. Any Factor 1 analysis must involve weighing of other considerations, such as the commercial nature of and justification for the use. No, 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 no! If it's transformative, it doesn't matter. Again, I go back to the Orville. Come on, everyone knows that the Orville is Seth MacFarlane's Star Trek fanfic. But it was his own story and his own ideas. And he had taken away all of the specific expressions of Star Trek. So then he could make the Orville and not run afoul of copyright. Even though it was for a commercial venture. Llama is clearly part of a commercial venture designed to attract as many users as possible and bolster Meta's position in the market. This commercial purpose should weigh against fair use under the first factor and offset in whole or in part any finding of transformative purpose. Right there, in their own words. The fact that it's commercial, the mere fact that it's commercial, destroys any other consideration of fair use. That's what they want. Therefore, even if the use of copyrighted works for ingestion by Meta were found to be a transformative use in this case, though it is not, yes it is. As I pointed out repeatedly, if this isn't transformative, what the hell is? But they want to completely destroy the first factor, the transformativeness, even though that has always been the strongest, and for a time the only factor in determining if a use is non-infringing. That would not necessarily mean Factor 1 favors fair use. Yes, it does. It's exactly what it means. And it most certainly would not control the fair use analysis. It absolutely would. Hey, this is 19 pages of crap. I'm not going to go over all of this. They do a lot on Warhol. They try to talk their way around Authors Guild, Google Books, HathiTrust, all of those. Ariba, Perfect 10, we talked about that one. Google v. Oracle. Sony v. Connectix, we talked about that. And it's just wrong. And if you've seen my previous videos, you know that it is. And look at this down here at page 11. Here's something to them that isn't distinguishable. What are they talking about? Of course, they're talking about Thomson Reuters v. Ross. Even though that wasn't even a generative AI. That wasn't even close to the same kind of technology as this. But did you see what I was saying at the beginning? And they're going to look for each little detail that they can nitpick and say, see, that's distinguishable. And then they go into a case that isn't even about generative AI, an AI that works a completely different way, an older type of AI that does in fact store and regurgitate little snippets of things. Oh, but it's got those two letters AI, so that means it's totally the same. No, it doesn't. But that's not even the biggest laugh. The biggest laugh is over here on page 17. They're looking at Anderson v. Stability AI. I don't know what good they think it's going to do to cite a case that isn't as far along as this one, and as though it were precedent. This case is far more mature than theirs, and so this isn't going to affect Judge Chabria. He's going to look at that and go, nah. But again, this isn't written for him. This is written solely for the purpose of propaganda. And that's why they're pointing out, like, Judge Orrick issued an order granting in part and denying in part motions to dismiss a first amended complaint. So what? We're past that part here. We're past fact discovery, and expert discovery is about to conclude. We're way past those initial motions to dismiss. And remember, in a motion to dismiss, because this happens before facts are adjudicated, or in this case, even before fact discovery, or a lot of times while fact discovery is still going on, you make this motion, and the court assumes, just assumes, that all the facts are correct. And then they say, okay, even if all of the facts are correct, does it still stand? Because if every single fact gets proven, but there's still no case, then there's no point in going on any further. But do you see what they're doing? They're taking a stage in the motion to dismiss where they're going to assume the facts and say, aha, see, the judge said the facts were true. No, he didn't. It's that initial motion to dismiss part where they just make that assumption. And that's what all of their crap is about this. Alright, so the Copyright Alliance losers conclude, a showing of substantial similarity between works is required when determining whether an inference of copying can be supported, was also unavailing in this case, where the copyright works themselves are alleged to have been not only used to train the AI models, but also invoked in their operation. But they're not. They're not invoked at all. That's not how this works. And again, that very claim has already been thrown out by the judge. Why would someone in an amicus brief make an argument that the judge has already been thrown out? Because it's not being made for the judge. It's being made for other people on social media and everywhere else to pull out and go, aha, yeah, see, it's right here. What do you got to say for that, Shane? Huh? You don't have anything to say for that, do you? Do you, The cases relied on by Meta for its fair use arguments are of limited relevance here, you wish. Given the narrowed interpretation of transformativeness post-Warhol, there is no such narrowed interpretation. Again, that's why so many people said that Warhol was a bad decision, because it would lead exactly to this. The court should deny Meta's motion for summary judgment. Here's a question. If they are in the right, how come none of them are doing what I did? How come none of them are actually going over it? They might be showing you screenshots of little things taken out of context. I've been covering this case the whole time. I'm the only YouTuber I know of who has. Believe me, I would love there to be someone else, because I got plenty of other things I'd love to make videos on as well. But no one else is doing this, and everyone's just throwing around this amicus brief as though it totally destroys everything Meta does. No, it doesn't. And that's just idiotic. It's crazy. It's insane. But again, it's not for the judge. It's not for the court. And Judge Chabria is not going to be impressed by this at all. And neither should you be. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the Comment God, shares for the Share Throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And of course, donate.pagosity.tv. That keeps me doing what I do. That's how I prefer to do things. I prefer not to sue everyone in the world about, oh, I got my copyright. I did something. That means I got copyright and I should get royalties and licensing. And, oh, you grabbed my video and did training on it. No. I'm relying on you. That's all I want. If you think there's value in all this hard work that I've been doing, if you think there's value in all this information that I've been giving to you, that I'm the only one who is, then just go there and donate. You can just do a simple one-time donation with PayPal or Venmo or cryptocurrency, or you can become a regular supporter. Keep me doing this. You can do that on Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. You can get these videos early and ad-free. And there are other benefits like live streams and AMAs, So thank you so very much for considering supporting. Thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, stay strong and be free.